A black teenage girl was dragged out of her first-class seat not once but twice as other passengers filmed in silence. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she calmly picked up her journal, sent one message to her father, and waited. What they didn't know. Her father owns the airline, and within hours he brought an $8 billion empire to its knees. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe with the bell on for more stories that expose the truth. At 6:12 a.m., the light filtering through the terminal windows at Chicago O'Hare was pale and reluctant, like the morning itself hadn't fully agreed to begin. The air inside Gate B12 hummed softly with overhead announcements, rolling luggage, and half-awake conversations. Among them, Ava Monroe moved with deliberate calm. She was 16, black and composed with the kind of quiet that made people look twice. A navy cardigan hugged her frame, buttoned to the top over a pressed blouse. Cream-colored trousers fell neatly to her polished flats. Her black curls were pulled back with a simple clip, not for style but because it was how her mother used to part her hair before church. Ava didn't dress to impress, she dressed like she knew where she belonged. The boarding pass in her hand read, "First Class, Seat 2A. She approached the gate agent with a soft, "Good morning." The woman's smile barely reached her eyes. There was a flicker, almost invisible, of something like doubt, like calculation before the scanner beeped. "Enjoy your flight," the agent said, almost too smoothly. Ava stepped onto the jet bridge without looking back. Inside the aircraft, the first-class cabin glowed under golden lighting, its wood-grain accents polished to a quiet gleam. It smelled of citrus oil and stitched leather. Seat 2A was waiting, tucked by the window. Ava placed her small tote beneath the seat and eased down her posture as careful as her steps. Then one message to her father. Boarded. "Thank you for everything, I love you." She powered off her phone and rested it face down on the tray. There was something sacred in this moment. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice. "You walk in like you earned it, baby. Because you did." Then came the boots, not rushed, not casual, just loud enough to make silence lean in. Ava turned just as a tall, broad security officer stopped beside her. He was white, mid-40s, barrel-chested beneath his navy vest. His name tag read Donnelly, though his presence didn't need introduction. "This isn't your seat," he said, not as a question, but as a sentence. "I have a ticket," Ava replied, voice steady. He didn't check. He reached for her wrist, and when she didn't move fast enough, his grip tightened. The jolt was sharp, not just to her body, but to the space around her. A ripple spread across the cabin. Heads turned. A phone lifted. A cough covered a chuckle. A woman across the aisle whispered, "She probably snuck up here." Her partner nodded. Like that explained everything. As Ava was pulled to her feet, her scarf slipped from her lap. No one moved to pick it up. No one asked a question. The silence was loud in the way only judgment can be. Donnelly guided her. No, dragged her down the aisle. One row, then another. Each step away from her seat was another foot deeper into disbelief. At the front of the plane, he stopped and let go. Her wrist throbbed. She said nothing. "There's been a mistake," he muttered, already turning back. "Wait here." And then he left her, alone in the jet bridge, with no reason, no apology, no name called, just absence. She stood for a long moment before sinking onto the cold metal bench near the wall. The hum of the terminal returned like static. From her bag she pulled out her journal, worn leather corners curling. She didn't open it, just held it. The only thing in her world right then that still made sense. She looked out toward nothing and thought, if this is the start, I wonder what the middle looks like. And just like that, the story had begun. The jet bridge was colder than she expected. Not physically, though, the steel bench along the side did press a chill through her slacks, but in the way that empty spaces hum with something unfinished. The roar of engines outside was muffled by glass and insulation. The warmth of first class, the soft lighting, the leather. The silence was already fading behind her like a mirage. Ava sat her back to the metal wall, eyes fixed straight ahead. The officer hadn't returned. Behind her, the aircraft door sealed shut again, not with drama, just a quiet click. She waited. A few minutes later, footsteps echoed. Not the same boots, heavier. The gate agent appeared different woman than before. Older hair tightly pulled back. Her blazer bore a plastic name tag, S. Walters. She approached like someone already annoyed. "There's a mismatch on your boarding record," Walters said, as if she'd delivered this line 100 times, and each time it bored her more. Ava kept her voice calm. "My name is Ava Monroe, seat 2A. I have the confirmation email, if you'd like to see it." Walters didn't look at the phone. Ava began to lift from her lap. "We'll look into it, just stay here for now." "May I ask what exactly the issue is?" Ava's tone was clipped respectful, possibly a duplicate scan or a discount override. Sometimes it happens when someone— She hesitated but only slightly gets upgraded late. The implication hung in the air like fog. "You probably didn't buy this seat." Ava didn't respond. The gate agent didn't wait for one. With a rustle of polyester and irritation, Walters turned and walked back down the bridge. Ava let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She unlocked her phone. The screen lit up instantly. "Dad." Her thumb hovered. Then she typed, "Hey, I got pulled from the plane. They said there's a problem with the seat. I'm okay just waiting outside. Not sure what's going on." She stared at the message for a second, then added, "Don't worry," and hit send. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from effort, from the weight of staying composed in a place that had already begun deciding what kind of girl she must be. From her bag she retrieved her journal. Its worn leather cover was creased like skin. The binding cracked softly as she opened to a blank page, but she didn't write. Not yet. She just let the book rest on her lap, a shield, a memory, a declaration. She remembered how her grandmother once said, "Sometimes the world will want to make you small, just to feel big. That's when you write your name big enough to remind them." Around her, the flow of travelers continued, some boarding, some transferring gates. A few glanced at her as they passed. No one stopped. A teenage boy in sweatpants glanced her way, then looked quickly at his phone. A flight attendant brushed past without acknowledgement. Ava shifted slightly, feeling the edge of the cold steel against her shoulder blades. She leaned back anyway. The pressure helped her stay present, kept her anchored. Inside the cabin, she had been dragged from the seats were likely being filled. Now, coats folded, coffee served, seat belts buckled. And out here she sat as if suspended in an in-between place. Too wrong for where she was, too quiet for where she should be. She didn't cry. That wasn't how she was built. Instead, she pulled the pen from the spine of her journal, pressed it to the page, and wrote just 2 words. "Still here." The call came just after the last group was announced for boarding. A different agent, this time young, freckled, barely 20, stepped through the door of the jet bridge, holding a tablet and a forced smile. "Miss Monroe?" he asked, hesitant. Ava stood slowly, her journal still pressed to her chest. She nodded without speaking. "Looks like you're good to go. Sorry for the confusion," he added, eyes darting briefly to the floor. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't meet her gaze again. Ava moved past him with measured steps. As she re-entered the aircraft, the cabin had shifted. It was no longer warm. It was watching. Conversations stilled, but eyes didn't. Some flicked up, then quickly away. Others lingered. A man near the front straightened in his seat, angling his body as if to subtly block her path. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The message in his posture was clear. Again. Ava made her way to 2A, her original seat untouched. The pillow still bore the crease from where she'd leaned moments before being removed. Her tote was gone, replaced neatly beneath the seat. Repacked, zipped halfway, her scarf folded on top. Someone had handled her things. She sat down gently, her spine aligning perfectly with the seat back. Across the aisle, a woman in her 60s, silver hair, diamond studs, a silk scarf knotted tight at her neck, leaned toward her husband. "Entitled," she whispered, not quite quietly enough. Her husband nodded. "These days they think a screenshot gets them anywhere," he replied, turning the page of his newspaper. Ava didn't flinch. She reached for her phone and turned it on again. Notifications flickered in a text from her father, a missed call. She opened the message and began to type. "Back on the plane." Still, no real explanation. "I'll tell you everything later." Then after a pause, "This doesn't feel finished." She set the phone face down again and folded her hands in her lap. 2 rows back," a young couple whispered. The man glanced at her, then pulled his mask up higher, as if her presence was contamination. The tension in the cabin was no longer silent. It was thick, pressurized, the kind of discomfort that people pretended not to feel but adjusted their posture to avoid. The flight attendant passed through the aisle, checking overhead bins, smiling at passengers in rehearsed rhythms. When she reached Ava's row, her steps slowed, smile faltered. Their eyes met just for a second. Then the attendant moved on her professional grace, cracking at the seams. Ava leaned her head slightly toward the window but didn't look outside. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the glass. Her face looked unchanged, but something beneath the surface was beginning to shift. She could feel it. How the world inside this plane seemed to pulse with the need to remind her she didn't belong, even with a seat, even with proof, even when she was quiet. Especially then. Over the intercom, the pilot's voice broke the silence with a practiced cheer. "Welcome aboard. Flight 227 will be taking off shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." As the voice faded into static, Ava exhaled slowly. The hostility wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It whispered in glances and posture in silence shaped like exclusion. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The aircraft door hadn't even sealed when it happened again. From the cockpit corridor came the low thud of boots, heavier than before, steadier, purposeful. Ava felt them before she saw him. The sound cut through the hum of boarding music like a warning. Officer Donnelly was back. His navy vest stretched tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched harder than before. This time he didn't speak until he stood directly in front of her seat. "Miss Monroe," he said louder than necessary. "You'll need to step into the aisle." Ava looked up slowly. "I'm sorry, but I was told the seat was cleared." "We're not going over this again," he snapped. "Stand up. Bring your belongings." Passengers turned. The air stiffened. A camera phone rose 2 rows ahead. Another followed from the rear. A teenager angled her screen discreetly toward the scene. Ava's hand reached instinctively for her journal, but the movement was too slow for Donnelly's urgency. He reached beneath the seat and yanked her tote forward, unzipping it with careless force. The journal tumbled out, landing face down. Pages fanned outward in a delicate arc. "No," she said, stepping forward, but he was already lifting the bag. The notebook lay open, spine-cracked corners curling upward like it had been bruised. One page had come loose, fluttering near the edge of the aisle. A sketch of 2 hands clasped, drawn in pencil, faint but precise. Beside it, a line written in deliberate strokes. "You are not invisible, even if they try to erase you." Ava knelt instinctively, but Donnelly's voice cut through her motion. "I set up." Now she gathered what she could, but the journal stayed behind, pages scattered across the carpet, like the quiet ruins of something sacred. As he led her down the aisle, again passengers watched in silence, though this time it was different. No chuckles, just cameras, faces half hidden behind screens. A woman whispered. She was just sitting there. A man leaned toward the aisle and muttered, "This doesn't look right." One passenger live-streamed the walk. The angle was low, but Ava's face was clear expression, unreadable. Lips pressed thin, eyes locked straight ahead. The video's title would later read, "Girl Dragged Off, First Class Twice." What is going on at NorthJet? But in that moment there was no trending hashtag, no commentary, just the weight of humiliation threading through each step. At the front of the plane, she turned once just slightly as if to look back at her seat. But then she caught herself and didn't. The jet bridge was colder than before, somehow grayer. Donnelly didn't stop this time. He walked her all the way back to the waiting area outside gate B12. "You'll wait here until further notice," he said. "You're not allowed back on until this is resolved with TSA and the airline resolved," she asked. "You've already confirmed my seat." His eyes narrowed. "We'll be the judge of that." And then he left. Ava stood for a long moment, then sat down hard on the bench she had occupied less than an hour ago. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of holding everything in. Her phone buzzed. One message. Not from her dad. Not yet. A friend had sent her the video. "Is this you?" She didn't respond. Instead, she opened the file and for the first time saw herself from the outside. Dragged twice. Silenced twice. And still. Somehow still standing. Somewhere above Ava's head, Flight 227 took off without her. The hum of airport announcements carried no apology. The people walking past her didn't pause, and the bench she sat on might as well have been part of the floor. Cold, unmoving, overlooked. She sat upright, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes distant but sharp. Her journal lay closed now, pages gathered, held together with a rubber band borrowed from the bottom of her tote. Nothing about her posture was loud, but everything about it resisted erasure. A new figure approached from the corridor. This man wore a tailored gray suit, his ID badge clipped beside a platinum lapel pin bearing the NorthJet insignia. He looked like someone used to being obeyed, and worried that might not be enough today. Ava Monroe? He asked. She turned her head slowly. Yes, my name is Everett Halston. I'm part of the NorthJet executive team. I want to personally apologize for the situation that's occurred. He cleared his throat. There has clearly been a mistake. Ava didn't respond. Halston hesitated. Would you allow me a moment to clarify a few things with our team? She nodded, once, silent, composed. He tapped his earpiece. Go ahead, he said, walking several paces away. 20 miles across the city, inside NorthJet's mirrored headquarters in downtown Chicago, the 34th floor boardroom was in chaos. Executives lined both sides of the long table, voices rising, fingers jabbing toward projected footage on the screen at the far wall. The video played in a loop, Ava being dragged from her seat. Then again. The second angle showed her journal spilling onto the floor, pages fluttering. It's already viral. Someone shouted, "Do we make a statement?" Another asked. Or do we try to contain it? Contain what she was confirmed in the system. We dragged a minor, in first class, the chief legal officer snapped. That's why we don't say anything yet. Gentlemen, a quiet voice cut in. Heads turned. It was Patricia Lee, NorthJet's director of in-flight services. She had been silent until now, hands folded on the table, her face unreadable. I spoke with the lead flight attendant on that route this morning. She expressed concern before takeoff, said she overheard a passenger say, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." The crew let it go. The room shifted. She warned the cabin chief it might escalate. He told her not to get involved. No one responded. And then Patricia added, "It did, back at O'Hare." Everett. Halston returned to Ava Miss Monroe. He said carefully, "We've confirmed everything. Your boarding credentials were correct. Your seating was correct. The interventions were not." He paused, then added, "I understand this has been degrading and I cannot undo what's happened, but I want to assure you NorthJet recognizes your right to be there, and we take full accountability." Still, Ava said nothing. Halston straightened. "There's one more thing," he said, quieter now. "I know you haven't told anyone, but we know who you are." At that, Ava's gaze lifted. "Your father, Victor Monroe, is the controlling owner of this airline. I imagine he's already aware of the situation unfolding." The words settled like dust over the terminal floor. Ava didn't blink, didn't speak. She simply stood, not fast, not dramatic, just with the quiet certainty of someone no longer asking to be seen. Halston took a half step back as if her stillness itself had weight. In that moment, it was no longer just a mistake. It was a miscalculation with consequences. They told her it was for her own comfort. That was the phrase the supervisor used as he gestured toward the narrow galley corridor near the front of the plane, past first class just beyond the flight deck. It was framed in stainless steel and shadows partitioned from the rest of the aircraft by a folding privacy curtain and a click-lock barrier. Ava hadn't noticed before. The door closed behind her with a mechanical sigh. The space was barely wide enough for her to sit. No windows, no seats, just a collapsible jump chair bolted to the wall, a counter stacked with backup utensils, and an overhead fixture that flickered intermittently like a tired heartbeat. She sat, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the silver wall opposite. Her tote was beside her, zipped halfway the corner of her journal, peeking out like a silent witness. A few minutes passed before she pulled out her phone. No signal, no bars, no Wi-Fi, not even the faint hum of a network trying to connect. She tried anyway. Opened a message to her father. "I'm back on board. They've put me in a separate space like a holding room. They're saying it's temporary." She tapped send. The bubble spun once, then froze, not delivered. She stared at the screen a moment longer, then powered it down. The silence was different now, not peaceful, not private, contained. Above her, the intercom buzzed to life. "Miss Monroe, please remain seated. For security reasons, you are not to re-enter the cabin until we've completed verification of your boarding credentials." No apology, no warmth, just a voice shaped by procedure and rehearsed indifference. She leaned her head back, letting it rest lightly against the cold aluminum wall. Elsewhere, far above the cabin, a server pinged to life in Geneva. Ava didn't know it yet, but her earlier boarding pass scan had already triggered a silent protocol, one designed by her father years ago. Any incident involving a Monroe family member on NorthJet property would initiate a remote sync of aircraft logs, staff communications, and surveillance data. The protocol was buried deep in the infrastructure, unnoticed by crew, unknown to officers. It didn't send alerts. It didn't require approval. It simply watched and copied and waited. Back in the galley, Ava unzipped her tote and pulled out her tablet. There was no network, but the document app worked offline. She opened a blank file, titled it Incident Report, Flight 227. She didn't start with anger. She started with timestamps: Gate B12, boarding time, seat assignment, first removal, second removal, names: Donnelly, Walters, Halston. Then came the tone, the faces, the silence. The page filled slowly, her handwriting precise. Each sentence, a stone laid carefully in the foundation of something bigger. She paused once, letting the pen hover above the screen. Her eyes drifted to the curtain just inches from her knees. On the other side, the world moved on. Drink carts, rolling passengers, shifting in leather seats, conversations resuming. But in here, the air didn't move. She reached for her journal, flipped it open, and found the sketch of the hands, the page that had fallen earlier. It had a new crease, now a scar across its center. She pressed her palm over it, not to smooth it out, just to remember it was there. Outside, the aircraft rose higher, slicing through the pale morning sky. And inside this quiet cell, Ava Monroe began to build her storm. The first video went live at 7:42 a.m., a 14-second clip, shaky but clear. A black girl no older than 17 being pulled from her first-class seat by a white TSA officer. No shouting, no violence, just the quiet horror of being treated like an intruder in a space she rightfully owned. By 7:55, it had been reposted over 12,000 times. A still frame from the video, Ava's face turned slightly, eyes focused forward. Jaw clenched, appeared on Twitter with the caption, "NorthJet drags young black girl off first-class seat. She paid for twice. #Ava Monroe. This is why we record." Then came the TikToks, the reaction threads, the YouTube explainers. One viral clip overlaid the footage with slow piano music and the headline in bold red text, "She wasn't just a passenger, she's the CEO's daughter." Back on Flight 227 near the rear of the plane, a teenage girl with long box braids sat in 27B, scrolling through her feed. Her fingers froze as Ava's video filled her screen. Her breath caught. "That's the girl they pulled off," she whispered to her mother beside her. "She's on this flight," her mother replied, voice low, urgent. The girl nodded, eyes glassy. She watched the clip again and again. In downtown Chicago, Victor Monroe stood before the towering glass windows of his corner office. His hands were clasped behind his back, his suit jacket perfectly tailored. The city stretched wide beneath him, steady, oblivious. His assistant entered quietly. "Sir," she said, handing him a secure tablet. It started. The screen showed a live dashboard, trending hashtags, mentions per minute, media coverage, international reposts. At the top, Ava Monroe, Howard NorthJet scandal. Justice on 227. His daughter's name was now global. He scanned the data without blinking. Then he handed the tablet back. "Activate it," he said. "Yes, sir," code G7 confirmed. A signal pulsed through NorthJet's operations network, from domestic hubs to international outposts, from gate agents to regional leads. Every NorthJet flight scheduled or mid-air was tagged with a temporary maintenance flag. Within 22 minutes, 286 aircraft were ordered to hold or return. The system did not ask questions. News alerts exploded across digital media. Breaking: NorthJet Airlines grounds fleet. Amid discrimination scandal. Passenger removed from first class. Identified as CEO's daughter. Nepper Ava Monroe sparks. Nationwide boycott movement. CNN broke in with a live segment. MSNBC followed with an emergency panel. Inside airport terminals from Los Angeles to New York, passengers stared up at departure boards flashing delayed in yellow block letters, each flight tagged with the code G7, hold, internal review in progress. Confusion spread. But it wouldn't last long. Within the hour, the story had eclipsed morning coverage of the markets and even international headlines. News anchors uttered her name with solemn clarity. Ava Monroe, 16, dragged from her seat. Twice. Not just a teen, not just black, but a child of the very empire now imploding under its own weight. Back in the galley, sealed from it all. Ava didn't yet know the world had seen her, but her father did, and the world would not forget her name again. By 9:01 a.m., Wall Street opened. By 9:04, NorthJet's stock had fallen 11%. By 9:37, it had fallen 32%. By 11:08 a.m., it cratered at 48%, shedding over $8 billion in valuation. The ticker flashed red. Analysts scrambled to explain. Every major outlet ran the same breaking headline in different fonts. Northjet meltdown 8 bob. Lost after discrimination scandal. Rocks. Airline. Outside Northjet's Chicago headquarters, satellite vans crowded the curb like scavengers. Reporters jostled for position, speaking into cameras as glass doors opened and closed behind them in a loop of panic. Inside the lobby looked more like a courtroom than a corporate atrium. Employees with badges tucked inside jackets slipped out in pairs. Some walked briskly, others ran upstairs. The boardroom on the 34th floor was a scene of surgical collapse, documents scattered across the table, coffee cups half full. Someone was yelling about shareholder lawsuits, another shouted about optics, a third stared in disbelief at his phone, whispering, "It's all gone." Across the wall-sized screen, 3 images rotated Ava's boarding pass, footage of her being dragged, a transcribed internal chat message that read, "Double-check her seat. She doesn't look first class." It wasn't just bad PR anymore. It was evidence. Another message followed. "Keep it quiet. We can spin this." Time-stamped, traceable, unforgivable. One executive tried to unplug the display. Another beat him to it and powered it off manually. But it was too late. The door opened. Victor Monroe walked in. No security detail. No entourage. Just a man in a black suit and charcoal tie, his eyes unreadable, his steps deliberate. The room froze. He didn't sit. Who authorized it? He asked her removal. Twice. No one answered. "I see," he said. Then he laid a binder on the table. Leather-bound heavy inside. He continued. "Are copies of every video, every communication, every timestamp, and every mistake." He looked around the room. Not angry, not theatrical. Just final. "You didn't remove a passenger," he said. "You removed my daughter." Someone inhaled sharply but didn't speak. Victor continued, voice low and razor clear. "You did not fail a protocol. You failed a principle." He opened the binder to a marked page, a list of names. These individuals are no longer employed as of this moment. No severance, no cover-ups, no one moved, no more NDAs, no more internal resolutions. An executive tried to speak. "Victor, we need to consider the legal." Victor raised a hand. "I've already considered everything, and I've decided." Then, with one final glance around the room, he said, "Losses are easier to recover than dignity." Silence followed. Not out of respect, but because the foundation had cracked and no one wanted to be standing on the wrong side of the split. From the hallway came the sound of printers spitting out exit packets. HR staff, ghost-faced, began calling names into the room. The restructuring had begun. Outside, a protest formed, small but growing. Handwritten signs waved through the glass. "Seats don't have color. Dignity doesn't need clearance." Ava Monroe. And above it all, the Northjet logo hung still polished silver and now permanently tarnished. The building hadn't collapsed, but the empire had just been told. The ground was no longer safe. The room they chose for the settlement meeting was intentionally plain. Gray carpet, frosted windows, one metal pitcher of lukewarm water, no clock, just a long, narrow table and 5 chairs, 3 occupied by Northjet, legal one by a senior vice president whose name Ava didn't care to remember, and the last by her. She didn't bring a lawyer. Not yet. She brought a folder. Inside her boarding pass, her journal pages, and a printed screenshot of her name trending worldwide. The VP began the way they always do, softly, sympathetically. "We know this has been difficult, Miss Monroe," he said, hands folded neatly. "We truly regret what's happened. The last thing we want is for this experience to define you." Ava didn't respond. He slid a slim envelope across the table. "We're prepared to offer a formal letter of apology, full reinstatement of travel privileges and compensation for emotional distress in the amount of—" She didn't open it. Instead, she looked directly at him and said, calm and clear, "So you're offering me silence?" Nicely packaged. He blinked. "No, we're offering you closure." Her reply was colder than the steel in the water pitcher. "Closure isn't something you can buy me out of." The VP shifted, visibly unsettled. Another executive leaned forward, trying a different angle. "You're very young. This could follow you. Public perception isn't always—" kind. Ava stared at him. I'm not afraid of the truth. The silence that followed felt different this time, not awkward, not strained, but weighted by something irreversible, like the moment before a storm makes landfall. She stood slowly, picked up the envelope, slid it back across the table, untouched. You had a chance to do the right thing when no one was watching. You chose silence. Then, I won't. And with that, she left. No security escort, no press. But outside the conference room, a junior intern who had overheard everything had already posted 7 words to X. She refused the bribe. Ava Monroe. Within 45 minutes, the hashtag returned to the top of trending charts. She refused the bribe. No hush money, no silence. Truth doesn't settle. News networks broke the update in real time. Talk shows looped her quote. A viral audio remix featuring Ava's line, "I'm not afraid of the truth," over a quiet piano track crossed 3 million plays in 6 hours. By nightfall, the Department of Justice had issued a statement. We have opened an inquiry into discriminatory protocols and procedural misconduct within NorthJet Airlines. The FAA followed, citing irregularities in crew discretion and passenger treatment. Internal whistleblowers began speaking to journalists. Former employees posted receipts, emails, voice memos. One read, "She was just a girl with a ticket. We made her a headline." The financial fallout deepened. NorthJet stock dropped another 12%. Major advertisers paused campaigns. 3 corporate partners issued public statements condemning racial insensitivity. The airline's value hemorrhaged into the billions. And still, Ava said nothing. No press tour, no speech, no selfie. She returned home that night and opened her journal, wrote just 2 words, "Not done." Across the country, people were listening, because silence was no longer protection, it was proof. The stage wasn't grand, just a modest platform set in the corner of a glass-paneled terminal at Chicago O'Hare, not far from where it had all started. But the world was watching. Camera crews from 5 networks stood shoulder to shoulder. Reporters scribbled notes beside tripods. Live stream icons flashed across a dozen news feeds. Behind the crowd, hundreds of travelers paused, not for their flights but for her. Ava Monroe stepped to the podium wearing a navy coat, simple, sharp, the same color she had worn the morning she boarded Flight 227. She took her time unfolding the note from her journal, creased handwritten, smudged slightly in the corner where her thumb had rested too long. Then she looked up and spoke. "I wasn't dragged off a plane by accident. I was targeted on purpose because of what I looked like and because some people still believe seats have color." The room held its breath, but I stayed standing, and I will keep standing. Not because I'm strong, but because I was never meant to stay silent. Flashes blinked across the crowd. But Ava didn't blink once. Let this be a message to every passenger who's ever been ignored, to every child who's ever been doubted, to every voice told to lower itself in the face of power. You are not invisible, and you do not need permission to belong. The final line landed not as applause bait, but as truth, heavy, undeniable. And when she stepped back from the mic, no one clapped right away. They were still absorbing it. 3 weeks later, NorthJet unveiled its newly restructured diversity initiative. No corporate buzzwords, no slogans made in boardrooms, just a name, the Ava Standard, a new policy requiring independent third-party oversight of all discrimination claims, mandatory training across every department from baggage handlers to executives, a grievance portal named Gate B12, and a plaque that read, "There are moments when silence becomes complicity." This company was changed by a girl who refused to be silenced. Outside in airports across the country, the signs returned. "Seats don't have color. We fly with truth." The Ava. Standard students carried them. Retirees lifted them. Parents gave them to their children. No longer just a protest. A promise. In the months that followed, Ava declined dozens of endorsements, turned down interviews, accepted just one scholarship from a public university in Georgia where her grandmother once picked peaches before school integration. But she made one public appearance. Quiet, unannounced. She walked through O'Hare again, this time with her tote over her shoulder, her journal inside. She passed Gate B12 without slowing. No longer a holding space. Now a symbol. Flight 409 to Los Angeles blinked on the screen above it. She didn't look back. didn't need to. There were no guards at her side, no gate agents watching, no passengers whispering behind phones, only a walkway, clear and straight ahead, and Ava Monroe walking forward, unshaken, unstoppable. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that uncover injustice and celebrate quiet resilience. This story shows that discrimination, when left unchecked, leads to downfall, while dignity, composure, and truth become the most powerful form of resistance. It reminds us that systemic bias still hides in plain sight, not only in viral moments, but in the quiet corners of everyday life.